Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of Clubhouse Conversations. I'm your host, Simon Thornton. With me today is the creator of our theme song. We didn't mention it or announce it or anything because I wanted to try and get him on the podcast. And we finally actually found an opportunity to bring him in, and it's worked out perfectly. So the writer, creator, artist is Paul Harrington. Paul, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Happy to get you on. I think it'd be rather than done kind of a throwaway little post in Instagram. I
Yeah,
thought it'd be nice to actually get you on and have a chat.
that's good to be here.
Yeah. So you are obviously. I've introduced everyone with their sort of hockey credentials. You are a hockey member. You are a playing member of Pembroke Wanderers, playing on the junior
Yes.
sides. You've come up through the junior section. I won't tell any more of your story, but I will pass it over to you because,
Okay.
as we've done with everybody, kind of started with their background in hockey, how they got into it, and all that jazz. But yeah, so I'll get you to jump in there, give us a brief history of how you came to play hockey and how you came to play in Pembroke.
Cool. Well, I came to play hockey from my mum, long-time goalkeeper for Pembroke and a couple other clubs we don't need to talk about. But no, I started in YM when I was like 6 and very quickly decided that they weren't for me and moved over to Pembroke then. Yeah, played a lot of my junior section as a goalkeeper before I realized I wasn't particularly good at it and came out field instead. Just kind of found a more natural place the other end of the pitch, scoring goals instead. Um, Played up a couple of seasons in the men's, got up to the threes, had a couple of successful seasons there. Went up to play for the twos, and then sort of as I was coming into college, I fell out of it. Just wasn't really enjoying my hockey anymore, and then about 2 years ago, year and a half more, like I kind of felt like I needed to come back, so I started to come back before COVID all hit, and then obviously haven't really had much chance to play since then. But looking forward to getting back to a new season.
Great stuff. Yeah. So you mentioned that, but most of your work really with Pembroke has been on the coaching side, hasn't it? You've sort of started coaching when you're like 16, 15, 16?
Yeah. So I would have been helping out around the place because I was there already. So 14, 15, I would have started helping out, and 16 really I was my first year coaching. So this what 8 or 9 years now coaching in the junior section of the club.
Wow. Fairly full on. You've seen quite a lot of kids come up and through. Uh,
Yeah, it's strange. This group of fourth years that have just finished the juniors would have been the first group that I coached around 8 years ago when they were 8, 9 years old. So this was a bit of a weird season as like a full circle moment of coaching for me.
oh my goodness.
Um
And now they're
yeah, so it's
starting to come in and play
so we
men's.
go from men's and women's hockey. It's kind of madness. Coaching with a couple of them as like their fourth year Goshko Award stuff, and then probably playing with some of them as well in the next couple of seasons. So it should be interesting.
And you're still only what, 22, 23?
23 in a couple of weeks. So
Wow.
yeah, 22.
Still so young. Still so young. So it
Yeah.
obviously it should be said we are related. You are
Yes.
first cousins.
Correct. Yeah, cousins.
Yeah, straight up. So there is a little bit of a family connection here. It was a natural fit when we needed to put something together for a bit of music.
Yeah, of course.
Keep it in the family. Um, but yeah, so we've obviously I know quite a lot about your sort of hockey career as you've grown up. So
Yeah.
uh, that's why I kind of want it to be sort of in your words as much as possible. But you would have been one of the sort of first, maybe not first, but I seem to remember back then there was a more concerted effort of getting younger players involved, more helping out.
Yeah, massively. Well, coaching definitely, but even playing, it felt as if there was a bit of a lull of the young players in the senior section of the club towards the top end. Like, there's obviously the elite young players go straight to the first, but it's sort of a massive drop off after that, or had been for years. I had the likes of Dougie and Paddy Conlon and Paddy and Jeff Garrett and stuff playing for the thirds team that were really, really helpful to me playing hockey for a season and helping confidence and everything. So, and since then, it feels like there's more and more youth players playing up, training with the twos, playing on the ones. But it is really great to see. So, but then with coaching as well, it's sort of, there was me and a couple others when I was sort of 16, 17 that were starting to get a little bit more respect maybe than younger coaches had in years, and that was a lot to do with the people in involved in management at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my mum was there just before I properly started coaching. That's why I started helping out so young. She was assistant junior manager to a couple of different people while it was sort of going through a big transition like 8, 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And no, it was useful because I got put in a position like during the season for coaching where I could work under people much more experienced than me, to progress my level in every aspect. I always enjoyed being worse than everyone around me, because you could either just fail at it or get better. And playing, but especially with coaching, I really enjoyed the challenge and I really enjoyed learning. And I did get the chance to coach with some great people, and even this year getting the chance to coach with some people I specifically asked to be the assistant coach for the under 14s A's team, because they're a really solid bunch of players. But I got to coach with John Pearson, and he was just someone who came into the club for the first time this year, really respected, and I just wanted to learn something. So unfortunately, not didn't get any games or anything for that team, but it still was kind of crucial, and I still like to put myself in those positions to improve and to learn and all that stuff.
Yeah. So as you said, you sort of only played up to, you were sort of pushing on and touching the twos, but maybe without having that sort of high performance, being in the sort of first team and stuff in there, where maybe that, as a lot of coaches maybe have that. Is that key then, having seen people getting to coach with people like John Pearson, who have, and some of those higher level coaches like Nats and Alun and stuff over the years? Did you then sort of, have you sort of mined them for information and tidbits that maybe fill in some of those gaps that you might have had that you didn't get from your playing experience?
Yeah, massively. I really do think that an awful lot of my playing improvement has come from coaching. Even basics that you have to hammer in every week that you say to groups of players, whether it be 6-year-olds or 26-year-olds, like whoever it is. There's an awful lot to say about repetition, I think. And as someone who didn't get that repetition from playing in school, where I think a lot of you see a leap in a lot of players as you, even as you play with them from 12 years old, you see people who play at a high level 6 days a week, as opposed to people who, like me, didn't have hockey in secondary school. And but I feel like I wasn't too hard done by, because I had coaching. I had this extra step that people didn't, where you had to think about the game outside of playing it. You had to analyze other people. So even watching now or anything like that, it's maybe subconscious at this stage, but I'm picking things up and kind of putting them to practice without really understanding why or where they've come from.
Yeah. And that's great. So it's had an impact. You've actually noticed an impact on your playing from your coach.
Yeah. Yeah, massively. Like technique stuff as well. I mean, because I played a lot of my juniors as a goalkeeper, I was sort of playing catch up when it was like 15 or 16 when I came outfield then.
Yeah.
We had another unbelievable goalkeeper just under me, Harry Watchorn, who's played twos with the club and had Leinster experience and all that sort of stuff. So I was sort of, it was inevitable that he was going to pass me anyway.
Yeah.
So I sort of went, you know what, Harry, I'll let you take this one. I'll just play my last couple of seasons in the juniors outfield. And no, kind of just fit in from there. So I didn't, like, I was playing catch up just to sort of get the grips of the game outfield, but because I was, maybe a year or two into coaching, it wasn't as massive of a difference as I thought it would, and it sort of carried through. I always took that coaching experience as a way to practice my own, like, practice what I preach and all that stuff as well. So
Yeah. 100%. You mentioned repetition. Like it's one of those things with
mm,
coach. I think I've spoken with a few people about it, and one of the sort of, not in everybody, but overall, one of the things that maybe lets Irish, and even we talked a little bit with Christian and stuff about the UK kind of attitude, that we kind of, kids particularly, jump to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing without, and they don't get the reps in on the basic stuff that they need to. So
yeah,
the basics are all over the place. Like if you look at the Dutch, what's one of the main things that everyone says is better than everybody? Their basics. Why?
the basics, absolutely.
Better mentality of pass, practice, 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 practice. It's going off themselves to the pitch, knocking a ball around, like deliberate practice, and messing around and getting just way more exposure to
Mm,
those reps in your own time as well, because people are messing around with the ball. That you see it in the
yeah,
likes of Al. He was one of those kids that was always on a pitch with a hockey stick, just practicing every which way to hit a ball. He's one of the people that very rarely mishits a ball. It's one of the reasons why he's
yeah,
the best goal scorers in the country, because he's one of the few people that practice that way and therefore it has that kind of, that it's not practicing until you get it right, it's practicing until you can't get it wrong.
Yeah.
And those reps are so important, because even it doesn't necessarily, you don't necessarily have to get to that level, but having
Yeah.
those, you get so much more control over your game. And coaching, I suppose, offers quite a good opportunity to get those extra reps in, because you might be on a pitch 2 hours a day before you're even doing your own training. And you're getting
Mm.
little bits in demos, maybe joining in games, practicing before, knocking around with the other coaches, and you get those more and more of those reps in. Um, and that's just on top of all the sort of like technical, tactical aspects of actually having to think your way through the
Yeah.
game. You're
Yeah.
picking up the read, better vision on the pitch, all those kind of things. Um, so it's really good that that's helped. And even now, stepping back in, I know you haven't had that many opportunities to do it, but most of that time through COVID and stuff, you've also been coaching. So have you noticed you're particularly rusty? Do you think being on a pitch coaching has maybe buffered you a little bit, that you're not as rusty coming back, or how do you actually feel about going back to play?
I'm buzzing, to be honest. Like I'm very excited to go back to sort of push myself to see what next season can be. But no, I think you're right saying that I have a stick in my hand every week. Like mm, the ball won't feel so unnatural to me coming back in. There's still a touch there, whether or not it's game ready or not is a different thing. But no, it is, I think, again, that repetition of, speaking about these kids that I have. It's the longest group that I've had that have just gone. Like it's meant that, like you said about the Dutch and everyone, there's been a shift, I think, in our juniors and especially coming when Natalie came back, and she was able to instill this. We don't just do a drill once a season. You'd probably do that drill for 4 weeks, and then you maybe don't do it for a little while, and you bring it back again. And it is all this idea that we want our basics in the players that we produce as a club to be better, and that allows me, I guess, to practice them every week. And I enjoy jumping into drills, especially with, you know 13, 14 year olds. I think it's kind of, it can make it a little bit more competitive for them, but as well, maybe it's let me not completely lose any touch or anything coming back into the season in a couple of weeks now, I'm sure.
Yeah, puts a little bit of manners on you as well when a kid's school.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe not.
Oh, it absolutely does. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to hear that, because I think there's a little bit of exercise ADHD, and like that, the older kind of mentality of like, oh, we'll just do it once, because doing it twice or
Mm,
three times is boring. Like, nah, gotta get it. What's the point in doing a drill one time and then never looking at it again?
no,
Unless it's the
completely.
worst drill ever, and you go, well, we need to bin that. We're never doing that again. You got to be able to give multiple exposures throughout, and I suppose that comes into session planning and all that kind of thing. Uh,
Yeah.
but
But those, I find those drills that you end up binning are just overly complicated. They try and work on 4 or 5 different skills at one time. Whereas, I really think that everything should be should be a little bit more simple than that. It should be very straightforward as to, especially for kids, like what you want to get out of one specific drill. You can explain it very easily. It doesn't matter what level coach you are, that it's one skill that's broken down, 2 skills that are really easy to break down, and that they can do it for 5 minutes. You can break something down. They can do it for 5 more. Like, it's not something that you just do for 2 seconds of a drill, like you said, the kind of exercise ADHD, and throw it away. It's something that can get kind of hammered in and not get boring. And the simple drills tend to be, much easier for that to work with than all these massively overcomplicated drills. But
yeah,
it also lends itself then to stuff that I even seen, one's players doing. I've looked at the Dutch men's, like, not first team, their drills, and it's some of the same drills that we use here. Like, the reason that a lot of these drills can't be translated and yet hammered in every week that they play hockey, basically the whole way up through.
yeah, because at the end of the day, like, as long as it's fun, and
Mm,
there's some times where you need to break it down and go over the technical skills and make sure people know actually how to do the skill. But once you get just people going, say, 1v1 on one another, like, there was a while there where I didn't see a single person go 1v1. You're like, you need to be able to get past people 1v1 on the
yeah,
pitch. So why not play those
yeah,
little like mini games, 1v1, play Champions League, all those kind of things, and try to have,
yeah,
rather than just going up against cones and going left to right drag, right to left drag. It's like you could do that a little bit, but then there's no point in being able to do a perfect left to right drag if you can't execute it against a player. So then bringing in that gamification of everything, and it's so important. And I think sometimes people almost overthink it, and it becomes, like you said, it becomes overcomplicated, but they also become pedestrian, and it's step by step by
Mm.
step. The game is just
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
I think it was the Leinster rugby coaches, like Leo Cullen and stuff. It might have even been before him. Whereas that idea of creating chaos
Mm.
in your training, because that's um, the variability in training is
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
important for your ability to actually execute skill. Everyone, when the conditions are perfect, everyone can execute. But if you don't have the variability of, if you can only hit a ball when it's in this place, you're
Mm.
no use when it's here.
Yeah.
So
Stood
it's like,
still on a sideline. Yeah.
yeah, we had kids today, and some of the coaches were kind of, okay, yep, stop the ball there and hit it. Like, nah, like
No.
I don't mind if they miss hit it every single time now, but they need
Yeah.
to get used to rolling the ball first, because they're very
Of
rare
course.
hitting that dead, and get good at doing that now.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Otherwise, you're gonna have to then go to a point where you're you're able to hit it dead, but then you can't hit it for love nor money because it's rolling. So
Yeah. Exactly.
started straight away. Um,
It was similar enough. There was the Leeds United documentary on Amazon. Their head coach, Bielsa, I think is his surname. He was talking about in training they play a game called, I think he called it Murder Ball, and it was like he changed the rules of football. He had a smaller pitch. There was no offsides. It was like 20 minutes of absolute running, very little stoppage, just like go the whole time. And similar to that chaos thing, it was situationally how can you adapt like really quickly if we change one thing, or if we change two things, and then let's see where we go from there. And it's a really short thing, and I've just even obviously not hockey, but you can kind of learn these things from rugby and from football when you look at other sports and how they, what he did was basically make football hockey. There was no offsides, there was no stoppages. You could take it free and just go the same way that we have with the pace, and how they adapt to change it, so that when you do end up getting slower in a game, because naturally a lot of the time your games are much slower than what you should train at, hopefully your brain works that, two steps faster than the opposition would. And I just think it's, yeah, something that maybe was kind of lost when I was learning first, was like how do I hold a hockey stick and hit a ball as it stood still, whereas now it seems to be, let's do everything as we move, everything a little bit quicker, and then if you mess up when you're going quicker, that's fine. But at least you're doing it as you would mess up in a game, whereas if I'm stood still and I'm messing up, I'd never do that in a game anyway, so what's the point?
100%. I'm not sure if it's a cricket phrase or if it's a tennis coaching phrase, but basically, there's one of them has a phrase, and it's grip it and rip it. And literally, the idea is literally squeeze on as tight as you can and swing as hard as
Yeah.
you can, and start
Yeah.
that way until you get it, and your accuracy will come after.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah, exactly.
there can be a lot to be said for it, because you see them slowing it down, and this can't control the stick for that long, and
Hmm.
trying to find that balance. All those kind of things I think come into it. We obviously going on a bit of a, not a tangent, because we were talking about coaching, but
Yeah.
more so you progress through your coaching, and obviously you were at Pembroke camps, and you were helping out at Pembroke camps, and now you're running the Pembroke camps. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Well, that sort of all happened on the same timeline as everything else we've just talked about. Like, I was on one of the first Pembroke camps as a goalkeeper, and then I came outfield, and I was on one or two of them as an outfield player. And then at around 15 or 16, before you were in charge, I started helping out, because the person who ran them at the time was my goalkeeper coach. So, I was just like cheap hands basically. And then I sort of, as I progressed through coaching, continued to do the camps, and I really think that's where I got to gain a little bit of confidence and improve as a coach, because like we are just saying with kids practicing at faster speed than they play at, this was sort of a chance for me to have a little bit more responsibility and a little bit more kind of just go at coaching than in a season where I'd be, an assistant or whatever it would be for kids at the time. And then, yeah, I mean, I spent from like 15 until what, 19 working on the camps for Brian before you, and then for you. And then you asked me if I'd take over then a couple of seasons ago, and only had one summer before COVID hit, and then obviously had to have a real think for a while last year coming into the summer, how we'd be able to get anything going. We managed to in the end, but it was like probably a month process of meetings with management in the club and the COVID committee and everything on how to best accommodate our members
Mm-hmm.
for last summer, just to try and get kids back out in the field playing hockey in Pembroke again.
Yeah, but you settled into it. You got it sorted. I think the COVID camps it were like that format of shorter days because you can't use the facilities and all that. From a coaching perspective, I hopefully from a player's perspective, it was quite a nice format because you
Yeah.
didn't have them zoning out.
Yeah, it was. I think for coaches it was great. It really was. But I think it suited us more than it suited a lot of the players. Um, the main goal for me was to get as many of our kids through as we could. So it was, if I did those long days, we used to have 9 to 2:30, I think, and they'd have a 15-minute small break and a 45-minute big break. Similar to their school day. It was a very in most of the camps in Ireland function in that time scale
Yeah,
because everyone's used to it. It's not that much of a deviation from their school routine for the rest of the year. So it has its merits. But last year, not being able to do that and Sport Ireland's restriction of 15 per pod, like I wasn't allowed on the pitch. I wasn't coaching last summer for the most part. I was just coordinating. I was there as the COVID officer and everything. So for the first couple of camps, we couldn't have contact. So it was mostly skills based drills with no defending, no it like really, but it was still good to be out and get them knocking a ball. So we had like 2.5 hour sessions. We broke it down into class age groups. And it worked. It did work. I think a lot of the older what changed last year and something we kind of wanted to introduce for years was this more, not I don't want to say elite based like level and coaching, but we really got to play hockey with the older kids, with the 14 to 16-year olds age groups. It became less child minding, and they were lumped in with a load of primary school kids to how can we improve the level of these players coming from outside the club as well, which we have always been a big proponent of in the all-star camps.
yeah,
And last year showed us that there was an interest from those older kids. We started to see more of them through the door than we had like really ever.
yeah,
um and we were getting big numbers, and we were still getting the interest from the younger kids because in their sessions we could still do all the same things that we always did. It is their summer, it is they want to be out with their friends. At the end of the day, the camps are just as much about having a laugh and being with your friends as they are about hockey. But if we can bring the two of them together, that's sort of where we hit our sweet spot.
100%. Yeah, that's something we had talked about years of trying to find a way that we could
Yeah.
said not necessarily elite, but where we could sort of um, condense it, and condense might even be the wrong word as well, but where it was real sort of concentrated, we could
Mm.
really go in and work on, say, an aspect of something,
Yeah. Yeah.
work on an aspect of thing, and you get their attention focus for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then like see ya, come back fresh, go again, rather
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
sort of,
Yeah.
oh my god, we're 3 hours into these drills, and like you've maybe taken in drill 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 are
Yeah. Yeah.
gone because they're teenagers and they don't have any attention.
Yeah. Exactly. No, and I think a lot of that comes from both of us have done this job for a long time of coaching, so we kind of know mannerisms, and at this stage it's maybe easier for like to plan a camp. But we did have a lot of feedback from parents just saying it was difficult for them to on these 2 hour time slots, especially with the younger kids. Parents didn't really want to only leave them for 2 hours because a lot of them, there was no point in leaving and coming back.
Yeah,
So like reluctantly we kind of approached this summer with change in mind. Again, we wanted to go somewhere between what we had last summer and the success that led a lot of the older kids to come through, and going back towards the older longer days, and reintroducing match play, like full contact. They're allowed to play actual hockey matches again, has been a big help because it's meant that for specifically our older kids, the way we've worked these camps so far this summer, we've had two so far, and there've been 70 secondary school kids on both of them, which is nuts, to be honest. Like we've never had anything close to that. We're getting full third, fourth year groups, full second year groups, and waiting lists for first years. Like there's a lot of interest in that senior side that I think is a carryover from last year,
yeah,
because it's at that age those kids are on summer, they don't really need to be doing camps, there's no need for them. So it's clear that they want to be there, and it has been clear because the level of the hockey's been high even with those longer days.
yeah,
It's been really warm so far this summer, so there's plenty of breaks throughout the day, there's plenty of water breaks, and there's plenty of room for fun as well. But we I thought I came up with it, but it turns out there was a couple of camps doing it already. We have like a league system that we do for matches in the afternoon, so after their lunch break
Mhm.
We on Monday I let them play as they were, and then as the coaches we came together and we sort of devised teams that we thought split fairly for Wednesday, Thursday, and played it as a league. So everyone got to play everyone every day. Short games, like 7-8 minute matches, like high intensity. Then you get a break. High intensity, then you get a break. So there was always room, and we gave them a coach each for the week. So there was a bit of familiarity there and a little bit of repetition. So a coach could actually try and work some of their own skills into this as well.
Yeah.
And it worked really well. It meant we had engagement for a whole week. People were really, really competitive, and they were really intrigued as to see who was on top of the leaderboard and who'd scored how many goals. And it did. It was really successful. So last week was our first week testing that out. Um, and we have 2 more camps for the rest of the summer, and it's definitely something that's gonna carry forward, I think.
Yeah, that's maybe something that, and I probably let it slip as well from maybe just, I don't know, being a little bit jaded from having done them for years. Is those little things of how can we improve
Mm,
it, how can we bring that extra level? And it was just kind of like, oh yeah, we've kind of always done it this way. Let's just bring them into teams with a bit of a mix, and the young
yeah,
ones can play with the older ones and stuff. And it was fun, and it was a little bit of sort of family atmosphere, but it wasn't
yeah,
necessarily good for the hockey. It might have been good for the odd one who had the capability to be able to kind of half coach the younger ones and to have the humility
yeah.
to bring everybody into the game, but the others it maybe just hindered a little bit. So it's
You've
great.
seen those people become coaches now, though, which is the interesting thing. Like it's very clear when we were doing it that way. Those kids that were able to bring their teammates in that are actually now coaching in the junior section of the club, and
Fascinating.
a couple of them coaching on the camps as well.
Oh,
Um, but but I yeah, though that style worked for those younger kids. It definitely did. But because we didn't have that many older kids back then, it didn't feel like that big of a thing. So in last year when the influx of the older kids came in, it was kind of obvious that we couldn't go back.
yeah.
I know it was something that we wanted to do for years, and for whatever, like there's millions of reasons we could list off, but it's felt last year because the camps were really the first hockey back in the club at all. The club wanted to get more involved than they had been previously.
Yeah. It's
Um,
the first opportunity to kind of hit reset as well since the camp started like 10 years.
really, really first opportunity, yeah. And like fortunate to be in the situation where I could sort of bring forward ideas that you had discussed for years that I've stolen and brought forward, and stuff that's in the club. Even the small things like having jerseys for the kids. So they're all kitted out in their purple all-star jerseys every day. So that any photos that get taken, all the kids are already branded. I see them wearing it during the season as well. It's just something small. It doesn't cost that much for us. And it's
Yeah.
just worthwhile because at every good camp, even I remember being as a kid, you got a jersey, and we didn't have them for years, and that wasn't necessarily our fault. There was always roadblocks here or there, but it's even something like that is great to have.
I mean, you're spending 110, 120 euro. You can afford to put €5 that less than €5
Yeah,
that towards a
yeah,
t-shirt, which
yeah,
people then wear around. And there's free, not free advertising, but there's very, very cheap advertising rather than
yeah,
having people in Sportways t-shirts knocking about all the time. And
yeah,
that's fine. And that's great because in some ways you're in competition with camps, but at the end of the day, if it all helps hockey, great. So it's
yeah,
okay.
exactly.
You may as well have your face out there as well. Otherwise, you're
Yeah,
leaving on the
yeah,
table, and you're leaving players on the table that otherwise could be at your camps who might have gone. Do you know what?
massively.
That suits me better. Why don't I go to that camp instead? Um,
Yeah,
on that note of other camps, obviously they're springing up like daisies at this stage. I think
mm,
it was slow in the first few years. There weren't that many people outside of people like Sportways doing them, and then
yeah.
Irish Hockey started doing them. But we've kind of been doing them for quite a while. Um, but how do you? There's obviously a few years of goodwill and stuff of the reputation that we built in the earlier years with Brian and stuff, and then carrying on into us. But I suppose how do you now stay competitive now that there's so many options out there? What's next for the camps? Where do you want to take them? What you have you any ideas on what you want to add without obviously giving away the recipe to the secret sauce?
Yeah,
What do you kind of
it's
want to see to stay competitive with those other places?
it's difficult, but there's a couple of things that the club themselves are introducing. So even I don't know if anyone has on the podcast has discussed the camera system that's going into Pembroke, and it's going to be unbelievable for the season ahead with live streams. And that's not what I want to use them for necessarily. Like in those league matches that we do, we could get them recorded, get a compilation. By Friday we could have a goal of the week thing. Like it's really simple. It's like one, it's already going in, it's already been paid for at that stage. It's just edit a clip together, post it on the social media, and it's something that I don't haven't seen many other camps doing. Now Southern Fried, they're, I think their social media is possibly the best of all the camps that I've seen. They're just on the ball. They're really, really good with it. But for us, it is, I really do think it was last year. It was the coaching. It was having you. It was having Maddie. It was having a couple of the coaches down that really got it into these players' heads that we're going to give you proper hockey coaching. We're going to give you match play hockey coaching. We're not just going to stand here and play games for the whole time, especially for the kids that want it to be real hockey. They want the summer to work on skills, and it's always a place, like it's still a friendly atmosphere. It's not a serious, gloomy place to be. It's a place that it's okay to make all these mistakes that maybe during the season when you're trying to compete for the team ahead of you, that you want to move up a team, it might be, there's nerves and there's don't want to make a mistake ever. Whereas in the camps, you're here for a week and you might not be here again, but you might be. And we have seen a lot of return people. So if, like, a lot of the people at camp 2 were here at camp 1. And that's just for the senior camps. This week of camps is the 4th week that I've done this summer, and 2 of them have been junior, like primary school camps, and 2 of them have been our secondary school camps, and there's 4 more to come after this. So it's even just in quantity, we had 5 last summer. I think we've only ever really had 5. We may have had 6 a couple of years, but we've had 8 this summer planned.
That's huge.
And senior camps are all looking like they're going to pack out, and the junior camps are big enough to make them enjoyable and have good energy at. So
That's great, because
to be honest, I'm not sure what's next, but they're growing at the minute, so we're gonna have to think of something.
Which is great. Well, it's great to hear that they're still moving. Like we are, there's certainly been little changes, and there's a couple of battles that sometimes you have to fight, but there are certainly little things that can help bring a good camp atmosphere, and I think they're definitely coming along. Even to last year or the year before, the introduction of things like the ball machine, where you can now, instead of us punters just smashing a ball at the kids, you can actually feed a consistent ball in, and now we can actually legitimately practice deflections properly.
Yeah.
You might get a deflection if I happen to connect with it. So little things like that, I suppose, are great to add in there. But
for sure.
You mentioned the number of camps. That was something that I always wanted to get to. I had 10 in my head a year that I wanted to get to. You were looking at. So I think I tried 6 one year, but we maybe had to cancel one. There was 30 people in or something like that. It didn't really work out. But the goal was sort of 2 at Easter, 1 at midterm, 1 at Halloween midterm, and then year 6 during the summer.
Yeah.
Maybe more. Obviously, the first goal I wanted to hit was 10. So it's great to hear that you're now starting to hit that more. Probably 12.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, obviously with the lockdown, the length of the lockdown we had, we couldn't do the couple of camps that started this year. But I mean, we'll definitely hit that one in October. And I mean, this is sort of trying to make a bit of a blueprint for sort of the week to week admin and how to do this, so that whenever it's someone else doing it, there's something in place at least that they can build off as well, and maybe a long enough structured go at it that it can be done as well. And I mean as well, honestly, it wouldn't be possible without like the quality of coaching that we have available in Pembroke. It's pretty astonishing. Like a lot of qualified coaches, pretty much everyone, and then just because of myself and Dave Broderick, the junior manager, who's been a big help this year in running them, because I think that the club and the exec had a discussion and they saw how well they went last year, and Adam and Dave and a couple of these on the exec had kids down at the camps last summer, and the feedback went back to the top directly, and it was all good. So and another step in the club getting involved in these, which is what we always wanted. We always wanted a little bit more backing, a little bit more, room, not just to spend money, but just for them it to be a real genuine people of the club, and not just something that's kind of pushed under the rug that makes a bit of money.
And that's kind
we
of
wanted it to be a big thing.
Like
no, it really was for years. Yeah.
It felt like a favor. We're giving you the pitch free, but yet it was all of the money was going back in to the club, except for what was going to the coaches. And you're kind of, obviously the car park, and particularly on the events, they do an amazing job. But I was always scratching my head, being like, why is there never mention of the camps? Like,
No,
don't necessarily want to talk the money side of things, but like they do all right, and they bring
they do
quite a lot
very
of
well.
revenue into the club,
Yeah,
particularly when we're not getting a lot of money back. You'd have to maybe scrape 50 quid out of the club to get some prizes for the end of the week. Like,
yeah,
where in
yeah,
other camps were buying tons of equipment, they were putting money into, I don't know, ice cream vans and stuff. It was very hard to get
yeah,
that thing out of it.
yeah,
It was all
yeah,
going one direction. And there was always a head scratch of like, why was it? It's only this year that I found out why. And it is being constantly put in under um, pitch rentals
yeah,
and not
yeah. Found that out in the AGM, wasn't it?
yeah. And
And look, whether that was anyone's fault or not,
exactly. I'm not
it's
definitely not pointing
yeah,
fingers, blaming anybody, but it does now make a lot more sense when you see the figures of why no one, it was never mentioned. There was always the big earner was the car park, and that was
yeah,
it.
yeah,
It was bringing in enough to at least cover your first team coaches. I'm pretty sure,
yeah, yeah,
certainly close to it. You know, it's covering quite a chunk of cash over the course of a
for
year,
sure,
and particularly over the
for
course of
sure.
10 years that we've been doing. But
Yeah.
that's I don't want to go down a too deep a rabbit
Yeah.
hole in that one um,
No, 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 no.
before I get in trouble. But what we will do is take a little bit of a U-turn because
Okay.
we're gonna go into your music because
Sweet.
you're multi-talented. Um, you are the artist behind our theme song, uh,
Yes.
as I previously mentioned, and you have quite a background with music. So, tell us a little bit about your history with music, your background, what you've kind of done a little bit in the past into college because you've gone and studied music as well. And yeah, take it away. Where was your? Let's narrow it down a little bit. What got you into music?
What got me into music? I think it was just exposure early on. Um, it was always playing, like whether it was in the car and whether it was CDs or going weekly shop and dad had a CD on, or driving to school and there was rush hour traffic, so we were sat listening to something on the radio for ages, and it was we had assembly every morning in primary school and we had to sing hymns and all this. So it was just a constant sort of, it was always around. And I remember leaving primary school and a teacher that I had when I was maybe my primary, maybe my junior infants or senior infants teacher. And she said, "Do you still want to be a musician?" I was like, "Hey, yeah, why? How do you?" She goes, "Oh, you told me that like the first day that I had you, and that was 6 years ago." And then that was 12 4 I don't know how many years ago that was, and it's
Yes,
still kind of happening. So it's just always been there. It's always just persisted. um Whether it's I've not been good enough at anything else, or whatever it is, it's just always sort of been like the main thing that's kept around, and it's never gotten stale, because a lot of things for me get stale pretty quickly, and music just never hasn't, in some form or another.
never managed to. And what was your gateway instrument? Was it guitar?
No, it's piano. I Mum made me, and I cursed her for years. Made me play the piano from a very young age, and made my brother play the piano as well. Couldn't quite force the youngest, but the Kian and myself had to play the piano. It was probably started at when we were 6 or 7. It's probably 7, and then went on until I finished, 3, 4, 5 grades or something like that, and then I finally she gave in and let me start learning the guitar, which is what I wanted to do the whole time. I thought it was cooler. Looking back, I wish I played the piano for longer, because I would love to be good at it now, and I'm not good at it anymore. But no, it was piano to begin with, which I think, for anyone, I would recommend the same. It just gives you a very easy understanding of music to go with, whether or not you like consciously accept that it's, especially in Western music with how we have it, it's the easiest way to understand everything that goes on. And as I've studied music theory since then, like, the piano is the thing that you visualize to think about everything. So no, it was the piano and singing really, but piano was the first instrument that I got into.
Yeah, that's very true, isn't it? Because it's the one of the few instruments where it's all laid out in
Yeah,
front. You can
yeah,
visually use it. It was maybe I made a lot of mistakes with my guitar playing and my music playing, and one of them was skipping all the theory and just being like, "Oh, we'll play the song." I'm basically
mm,
a kid that wanted to learn a reverse before they could even push a ball. Um, and
yeah,
left a load of theory on the ground, which I've never, even doing music class, it's still found it hard to marry the two together. But you're absolutely right. The piano, and it keeps, it's the one thing that keeps coming up of like, oh, if you have a
Yeah.
piano in front of you, you can figure out this. I'm like, ah, that would have been so much easier. Just the theory, the understanding of,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
the the
Scales and all that and all. Yeah, exactly.
exactly, and seeing how they
I
relate, because it's hard to visualize how they relate to one another on a guitar neck, because
Oh, really hard.
shift
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
time, and you don't get that. I mean, maybe going up one string on the same string, you can kind of figure it out, but it's
Mm.
how other notes relate to one another is a lot harder to visualize and appreciate, I suppose.
Yeah, massively. Yeah, of course. I think I understand all that now, but definitely once I stopped playing the piano and I moved to guitar, all I wanted to do was play my favorite songs. I didn't really care why what was happening or anything like that. It was the guitar was cooler than the piano was because you could play it standing up. You didn't have to sit here. You didn't look like some kid playing classical music. Like you could play whatever you wanted, and even through secondary school, I think the way they teach music in this country in secondary school gets a little lost on people. They focus on a lot of history, which I think is important, and but going into analyzing things is not as focused through theory as I think it should be.
Mhm.
Not in the same way that you know you learn a foreign language in secondary school where you have to learn it from the grammar and you work your way up. Music should be taught the same way, but it's often like we both did on the guitar. Can you play this cool song?
Yeah,
And then you work on it from there, and it's a little bit backwards.
yeah,
And it was only really getting to college and when I got to choose theory as an elective for third year and fourth year, to be part of my final degree. Really, it's sort of where I now, when I play something or when I hear something, kind of know where it comes from, and it makes, especially in creation, it makes going down different avenues easier because you understand where you've come from, you understand where you can possibly go, and then you can break all those rules, which is now feels like the point that I'm getting to.
yeah. I think that is always the piece that I think I missed, was
Mm,
having enough tools and understanding of how to do it to free me up to be creative.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can mash away and I might be able to come up with something. Will I be able to repeat it? No. Do I know what I did? No. Did it sound
yeah,
cool? Hell yes. But
yes,
can't really do anything about it. And it left so many deficits there, that something that you've been very good from the off about, firstly learning songs and playing them and being happy to, like, I don't know how many family events you're embarrassed into playing songs for us and stuff. Usually by your mum after a few wines, or some of the uncles,
yeah,
or
yeah,
mine. Let's be honest. Go on, Paul. Will you play something there? Um,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So there was, you were much better at pulling it out and doing that, and you were also very quick to start writing your own stuff. I think that was the key.
yeah,
Even if it was just a few chords and a few lines of vocals. Now, I could be wrong, but
mm,
that's my overriding memory. And is that kind of how it felt to you, or how did you go there?
yeah. Um, Really, I think I started writing because I wasn't good enough at learning other people's things like that. So saying that I was able to take some and play a song in general, I've never been good at learning more than a verse and a chorus of someone else's song. I tend to forget words a lot, but if they're my own, they tend to stick a little bit easier. So it just felt, and it wasn't until I started playing the guitar, and it was my first guitar teacher who just asked me just one day as like a challenge, like, oh, you've learned 6 chords now, like turn them into a progression, and we'll play them next week. And then I only did guitar lessons for a couple of years, before I came back to it when I was 16 or something, just to do my leaving cert, and then come into college with a little bit better understanding. And my second guitar teacher then, so when I was 15 or 16, um, his entire thing was on what can we do on the spot. So it was always creation and it was always all that stuff. And I mean, I'd been writing songs a little bit before I got to that point of 15, 16, but it wasn't really until then that I started writing consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just sort of a way that I could practice things. And I mean, singing is what I do best. It's what it's my main instrument, I suppose. It's because I've done it all my life. It's the most practiced. So I also needed a place for that to go. So writing kind of felt like a natural spot for all that to happen into. And I still struggle. Like lyrics are the hardest thing for me to do, and it's such a cliche. Like they're the hardest thing for everyone to write good lyrics. Um, but I find it nicer to get stuff from my own head out that way than any other form of expression that I've come across. And I've tried a lot. I've tried like poetry and writing short stories, and I really liked English in secondary school for those reasons of just writing. But this is sort of the way that I've always gravitated towards easier as the place to do it. And my process have changed a lot over the years.
Yeah.
Um, but it's still, the same when you get it down to the bare bones.
And overall, is it sort of almost like I guess maybe like a diary or a mindfulness journal in your writing, or does it have a particular theme? Generally speaking, like, do you particularly sort of write about this kind of stuff? Is it how does your writing sort of come out? And even to come back to your point, I kind of forget that singing is your sort of prime.
Yeah.
The piano, guitar. I obviously
Yeah.
jump to those first because they're what I know, but forget that actually they're a vehicle to supply your voice.
Yeah.
And I kind of
Yeah, no, that's what they are completely. The writing process, mine is backwards. It like we were talking about with music theory and with hockey stuff and learning it from the ground up. Mine doesn't make any sense. I have very very rarely in my life written a song with an intention before I start. I tend to, whether it's sitting down at a guitar or now with all the producing, whether and it's like basically finishing a full song and then going to write words. I I tend to find it harder. It's as if I have to force it, and it's a very purposeful thing if I start with an intention or with an idea. So I like to just write and write and keep writing, and then whether it's a day after I finish the song or it's like 6 months, I'll assign meaning to it at a later point because it's come from somewhere
yeah.
inside. So it had to have meant something. I just might not understand completely what that is yet. And I always have kind of liked that freedom. And I think college kind of took that out of me a little bit with, you know, good for some reasons in that we had to write a lot of briefs and with intention. And it made me really think about my writing. But it stunted, how I actually like to make music. And because we weren't in college this year, I ended up gravitating back towards that and a little bit of combination between that. And I read a couple of books this year that sort of changed massively how I write. And like you said, is it a mindfulness thing? I now do write specifically just for no other purpose than to just write words.
Yeah.
um there's a website that myself and a couple of my friends from college we use. It's called Object Writing, and it's you literally just get given a word or something and you just have 10 minutes, no gaps. You can't lift your pen off the paper, just write. And you're supposed to do it in the morning, the first thing when you wake up, like David Bowie used to do it and everything, morning pages. And you don't read it again, you just write it and you leave it. And like every now and then we'll have a well, it's Zoom calls now, but it would be meet up and you all read random pages and it's just the weirdest stuff. Like it doesn't make any sense. But every now and then you find something that you either have used in a song or something that will work itself into something in the future. But it's just kind of stream of consciousness, mindfulness writing, just kind of let your brain do what it does. And that's sort of brought me now back in the last year. I've written more songs than I did in the other 3 years in college, like combined. So
Yeah. And is it, I suppose, maybe it stunted some creativity while you're in college, but being able to write to that brief, do you think that has then helped you now, if you go back to your style in terms of staying away from sort of writer's block and stuff, because you
yeah.
can keep it flowing better because you're used to having to write it maybe on a topic that you didn't even care about, and you have to,
Yeah.
so then now you actually have something that you want to say and it helps you kind of keep writing around that in the right direction.
Massively, massively. And whether that's writing with college briefs or surrounding myself with people through college. And I had quite a musical secondary school, but not to the extent that college has kind of allowed me to do. I went from 900 people in my secondary school and maybe 60 of them were musicians to an 800 person college. So I got smaller, and there's 800 musicians and there's 800 different styles of writing and playing and everything. And a couple of my very close friends from college are like really really specifically good at writing words, and they'll sit down for 5 minutes, and if you have a whole song with no words, they'll write you the words for it. And they can just set off from a point and get to their like destination easily. So it's been a mix of writing with briefs and just kind of learning from the process processes of those people, and it's, yeah, it's easier now. Writer's block doesn't happen as much,
Yeah.
doesn't happen for as much, and it used to happen for a long time too. And I'm sure there's plenty of musicians who, like, it's not a day, it's not a week, like it could be 6 months and nothing that you do is worth a cent.
Mm.
um but no, this last year there was sort of maybe, a rock meets a hard place. There's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
It was sit down at Zoom calls every day for college classes, write my thesis, go to hockey on Sundays to coach, and what else was, like, there wasn't much else. So it was sort of a, I had to finish college with a portfolio of, you know 4 or 5 of the best songs and the best production that I could possibly produce. So I had no choice but to write this year. And I mean, it came out with, I came out with 5 or 6 songs that I could whittle down to 3 or 4 now to put together and release out into the world for, like, for the first time, really. So
Yeah. And I suppose on that side of things, do you have a sort of this may be jumping and skipping, and I may have to circle back at some stage, but um, has it given you an insight into, because you obviously have to produce too,
yeah,
has it given you an insight into how you kind of want to proceed? We'll talk a little bit about your music coming up, but
yeah,
in general, do you sort of want to go the Ed Sheeran route where you put out a little bit of your own, but also sort of spend,
mhm,
look, he's one name of many people who've done this over the years, where they actually are writing and producing behind the scenes, and what
yeah,
you see of their own work is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a kind of, yeah, I'll give it a go. I'm quite good at these
yeah.
things, but I don't really want to do it. Do you see yourself going that route and combining all of them to make sure you're always busy, or do you really want to focus on yourself?
I think for now, it sort of feels like my main focus really wants to be on the music that I put out into the world, and whenever I can get back to gigging. But I really, really enjoy writing with other people. So that's like, if that could possibly turn into an avenue that I could go down. But in second year, I took a module in composed film and television,
Mhm.
and that sort of sparked an interest I never really knew I had. Like, as far back as talking about listening to music on my way to primary school with my mum in the car, she'd have RTE lyric on, and there was this classical side of music and playing piano then that I hadn't touched since I was quite a young child. And this module brought back an awful lot of, like, subconscious music for me, and it became this kind of obsession for a while. And we had to rescore film scenes, and we had to do everything from the sound effect work to the scoring to producing these, quite long pieces of music that didn't have lyrics or vocals in them, which is something that I had never done before. So it was stepping back from how I create, and forced me to do something completely different.
So you,
So
sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I to be honest, I don't really have a path at the minute.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that fact. It's that there's enough interest in enough different avenues, but the main thing is that after 4 years of college, I finally have a body of work that I'm proud enough to put out into the world under my, well, not quite my own name, but that's its own thing.
Yeah, because you're
And
not
and
the
and then I
famous Paul Harrington who played.
no, there is, unfortunately, well, maybe not unfortunately, but there is an already famous Irish Paul Harrington making music from playing the guitar and singing. So that was a quick meeting with a business tutor I had in first year, and I went, and he came in and said, "Any relation?" I said, "No." He goes, "Are you here to talk about getting a stage name?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, you need one." And I was like, "Grand, that's all I wanted to ask you today anyway." It was supposed to be a 45-minute meeting. It took all of 10 seconds for him to give me a definite answer.
And what is
Um,
it? What is the stage name?
it's Pluto, so Pluto, like the dog from Mickey Mouse, or the planet, whichever one you'd want to go with.
Maybe go with the
It
planet.
was,
Disney are pretty quick on copyright stuff.
yeah. Oh, Disney, of course, coming for me. It's not the dog, it's the planet. Um, it's it that was a long time coming. That's, nearly 4 years of trying to think of something that didn't make me cringe when I said it out loud. It's the only thing that I've ever come across. I quite like it, to be honest. It's not difficult. It's easy to remember.
Yeah.
Um, it also couldn't be too far from my actual name that it didn't have any, like, there was no reason.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously Pluto and Paul Harrington are vastly different, but, like, it's, I didn't just call myself Young something or Lil
DNA,
whatever. Like, there was,
yeah,
yeah,
there's DNA there. There's a P. There's an L.
Yeah, exactly. There's a P in
Um,
it. Yeah, that's all that matters.
yeah, yeah, that's all you need. Um, and
Mm.
then going off on a not going off on a tangent, but that had a thought. I suppose it's also kind of ambiguous in that Pluto could be you, it could be you with backing, it could be it leaves you open a little bit more to multiple
Completely.
iterations as you develop and
Yeah,
move on.
yeah. And it's I like the band that I had played with for the last couple of years, managed to nab myself musicians who are far more talented than I am, and like good mates of mine and everything. So it's the sort of thing where it's not me trying to hog everything, because I might in the past it's been I've brought them a song, but it's ended up live sounding different than it did when I played it in my room for the first time.
Yeah.
So going under another name doesn't take it sort of, to me, doesn't take away from what other people behind me are doing. It's not, you know, Paul and the whatever, like they're the second. It's, whether it's a band or whether they're the people I'll always play with, or whether it's a completely different type of music from one project to the next project and it's different people involved. It's sort of like you said, a little bit more ambiguous than perhaps my own name would have been out front, which I like as well. It kind of lets me hide behind this moniker and kind of do whatever comes to my mind, because the the group of tracks that I have ready to go out later this year were written, a couple of months, and the stuff that I've started on now is quite different.
Yeah.
And that stuff, it might come to something, it might not, but not being, Paul Harrington kind of lets me to do whatever I want, really, which is nice.
Yeah, that freedom again, it helps the creative process where you're not
Yeah,
stuck in anything particular.
yeah, 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 massive.
How many people have had, off the top, I don't know why Sia is the only person I can think of right now, or maybe
Yeah,
uh, it's a little ambiguous. It's not a real name. It protects a little bit of anonymity. You can have multiple iterations. You can kind of reinvent yourself as much as you want. Um, maybe that's a bad example. I'm trying to think of another one that was kind of a group, but also not a group, and it kind of gives you, I suppose, like most bands. I guess.
someone like Mr. Jukes from Bombay Bicycle Club, and they'd be like a really famous band, and they're a very obvious sound. But then he goes and does his own stuff, and it's completely different. And he's just done a project with a guy called Barney the Artist, and it's like a '90s. It's an ode to '90s hip hop, and he just whatever, because he's Mr. Jukes. He's not one guy, whatever, bald, wears shirts and glasses, and he's one sound as Bombay Bicycle Club. Now he can kind of do whatever. And I'm not comparing myself to Mr. Dukes, but like it is that kind of thing, like you're saying, Sia, or any of these people that have this freedom to do whatever they want. And I kind of want that from the off. So if I can push that as I start, then hopefully it'll just kind of keep going as that for whatever a career in the music industry looks like for me.
Yeah. What sounds you've got a lot of strings to your bow. So even if you push that avenue and maybe that doesn't necessarily fully pay the bills now, there's an avenue where you can sort of produce on the side, or you can
Mm,
contribute to stuff, and there's the sort of cash that lets you go off to play, and they
yeah,
still, it's not like you're having to work in a cafe while you're waiting for gigs. You're actually still in the same industry, and one will inform the other.
yeah,
It gives
yeah,
you the
yeah.
freedom to go any direction. You mentioned you've got some new stuff coming out. Before we talk about that, you've kind of cleaned your slate. Tell us a little bit about that and why.
Yeah, so I mean, I had a good lot of stuff on like demos from the last, 4 or 5 years, even before that, out on SoundCloud, and it was a long discussion, even through the research for my thesis and everything, and looking at specifically at branding and marketing, especially in this like social media digital age. It's ridiculously important what's out there before you are, as whatever you want to present yourself.
Mhm.
And I just wasn't really, whether or not I disliked them, it wasn't what I wanted to the tracks that I had out weren't what I wanted to present myself as. They're not something that, people will never hear again. Like I think a lot of it's quite funny, and it's, for me, it's nice to see, where I was 6 years ago and where I am now in terms of writing, producing, all that stuff. But I really, from a marketing perspective, it needed to be wiped completely clean just before I get going. And then once stuff is out, and once the ball is rolling, a piece of advice I got given to got given by a friend of mine this year who's in a successful Irish band. They're doing really well for themselves. He goes, it's kind of like it it feeds itself. The habit, you'll release and you'll release for the first time as something proper, and all you're going to want to do is release again. Like it's the most nerve-wracking piece ever. Like I'm, waiting to get songs back so that I can really start scheduling a marketing plan and an actual release date, and I'm already a little nervous and a little excited. And he goes, yeah, like wait for that day before feeling, because all you're going to want to do is get it over with and then start the whole cycle again. So yeah, a clean slate kind of lets me do that from that fresh start, from that was all released as Paul Harrington too. So
Yeah.
possibly just a yeah, fresh start
Yeah,
pretty much.
and as you said, it's key in the social and digital age. I suppose someone like Metallica coming up on 40 years now, and back in the day it was demo tapes, and
Yeah,
might be maybe 50 of them out and about of the early days. But once they come out with a real album, that's all people are really hearing. They're not going to hear that.
yeah,
Diehard
yeah,
fans will go find some of the early stuff and the covers and all that stuff. It also then leaves you stuff that later in the day maybe it's something that gets repurposed as a B-side, or it's like kind of a
yeah, massive.
collection of like the road to here or something like that you release later, or even just
Mm,
yourself. It's the record of the learning that you've taken to get there. That's that
yeah,
first album or that first chunk of music.
yeah.
That's not the start. There's all this. There's the to continue
Stuff
with
beforehand.
metaphors. It's
Yeah,
the
massively.
water. Um, yeah, fascinating. And how did you find then? So speaking about the new stuff, sorry, I was
Yeah,
jumping. Speaking about the new stuff, you've got stuff already in. It's off to mix.
yeah. So I would have, as the kind of the last 4 years has gone on. So I went to BIM, which is a music college that started in Brighton, I think. And it's there's a good few of them in England. There's one in Dublin, there's one in Berlin. They're all over the place. And in the songwriting section of BIM, you're forced to do an awful lot of producing. So it was something that I had to I did a little bit beforehand, before college, but I have since had to practice an awful lot. And I'm by no means particularly good, um, but I'm good enough for it to get sent off to people to fix up. So the pre-production, the writing, the recording, I can all do that in a bedroom, which is kind of crazy. And but then it needs to get sent off to someone with a better ear than myself, so they can mix it and master it and get it ready to get put out. So for radio play, for online streaming, and whether that be Spotify or Apple, and I know they all have slightly different requirements and
Mhm.
just stuff that I'm currently not good enough at yet. So I figured, if I want a good enough product with this clean slate, I may as well put a bit of money into getting them sent off for myself to be happy enough with what I'm actually going to put out into the world for the first time.
Absolutely. And I know you've told me you don't have a date yet, so hopefully we can try and keep people updated. But it is coming. It's on the way.
It's coming. My possibly presumptive or like late September is what I'm hoping for the first one.
Yeah.
And that's just, I could get the song back tomorrow, but I still need time to then work on stuff that isn't the music side of things, which is all completely new to me. And I mean, there's more independent musicians releasing music than there ever has been. So you kind of, and this is what my whole final year project was on. It was how to do this successfully in an age when 40,000 songs a day get uploaded to Spotify. Like, how on earth are you supposed to? And that's just Spotify. And then there's Apple and there's Deezer and all sorts of other things. So
How do you
there's an
hear the noise?
yeah. How do you and it's easier to create and to get into the industry, but it's also kind of harder because there is so much stuff that gets put up. So I could, like as I said, I could get music back tomorrow, and I'd still need 2-3 months to fully and successfully plan and execute like a marketing plan and a release everything. And it'd be nice to release as gigs kind of come back as well, so that I'm not just releasing into dead space.
Mm.
Like you saw, everyone has favorite musicians that definitely delayed releasing music last year because there was no point. If you released something, it'd be forgotten about, as it is pretty much always with streaming in 6 weeks. And if you can't tour it, if you can't play gigs with it, it's kind of just lost. So it would be nice to release stuff as gigs come back. I guess.
Yeah, because you had to be a real big dog with a avid fan base already to be able to release it and
Like,
do well over the last.
yeah, like I think Drake was really the only proper Drake, Ariana Grande, a couple others, like the biggest of the big names release music, and a lot of the artists that I love waited.
Yeah,
Um, there's another podcast that I listen to called Are We Live, and it's Tom Mish and Jordan Rakai and a couple other like of my favorite musicians, people I really respect and look up to, and they talk candidly about all this stuff, and they went, yeah, if I release music now, and this was last December, they go, I won't make any money. This
yeah,
is my job. Like only 2 years ago I was still working in ASDA. Like
yeah,
I now have to be conscious of this as well as it being a creative thing. For someone like me who wants it to be a job, you have to also focus on the money side of things as well.
yeah.
Um,
Especially
and
in this
for
day,
how little, yeah, the
like
firehead, sorry.
yeah, yeah. Especially in this day and age, like streams, you're not getting much money off streams. You have to be
Yeah,
in millions of streams, and then you might make a dollar or two. Um,
yeah,
like it's too hard. Whereas before, it's now all touring, it's all gig money, it's merchandising and all that stuff.
merch, yeah,
Whereas before, an album release was actually that could keep you going for a little while, and
it
then
did, yeah,
it got you that covered that period maybe when you were recording and stuff like that, and then you go out on tour, or your tour would fund your recording block, and then your money from the albums and stuff would fund your touring
yeah,
block.
yeah,
The cycle would kind of continue. That revenue stream is gone unless you are massive.
yeah. It really is. It's, I mean, it's 0.0000006 of a cent per stream on Spotify or something ridiculous. Like I know there's the UK and the EU are trying to bring in regulations to change it, but I think at this stage streaming is too big for that to get changed. And to be honest, I think there's more pros than cons with streaming, with how easy it is for anyone in the world to put out music. It's and then for how easy it is for anyone in the world to find music. I just think that makes it easier. Something does have to be changed about the money thing, but at the same time, because of that, you're seeing like a massive influx and like a resurgence of physical form music. Like last year, cassette tapes sold 100,000 units worldwide for the first time since 2003,
Wow.
which is kind of crazy. And record sales are way higher than they have been in a long time, and all this stuff. And then there's online version like Patreon accounts and like bands like or groups like Disclosure posting full breakdowns of how they make songs and giving away all their secrets so that anyone anyone with a laptop and 200 quid for some software can make what all these top guys make. Whereas before, the engineers behind all the Beatles music had their secrets in vaults, like they didn't want anyone to know. And now, because of streaming and because of the internet, it's so easy and yet so hard.
No, it's such a hard one to. Everything will right itself, and as you said, things are starting to come back because people want that
Yeah,
thing. They want something they can touch, they can feel again. They want an experience. People are more and more
yeah,
inclined to get an experience now. We've had that sort of like that overcorrection of oh my god, it's great to have so much music at our fingertips and everything, and now it's the sort of maybe auto correction back to some sort of balance in the middle, hopefully,
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah, yeah.
artists and musicians. So tell us, left it a little bit late, but tell us a little bit about your process in putting together the theme song. I know it wasn't necessarily, I kind of gave you sort of some things that I had in my head
Yeah.
and some ideas. So maybe it's a little bit more like one of your projects where you're writing to a brief. But how did you find it? Did you enjoy it? And yeah, how did it go?
So it yeah, like you said, it was a little similar to like a brief that I would have had in college, but I'd never had to compose something that short.
Mm,
So you sent on references which were helpful, and I've like I listened to plenty of podcasts. There's really long intros, there's really short ones, and there's sort of no right way to do it. But you had a couple ideas in mind. You had a couple of things that I went off and listened to, and I may have sent two or three versions before we sort of settled on one that I then kind of finished out and made sure it was right.
yeah,
And no, it was interesting. I think as well, my sort of I like the idea of a build. You're starting something, you want to go into it, the whole idea of a theme song just kind of filtering down. It's not really what I feel like needs to be done. So it was I wanted to start with some sort of a build, and that was I have a massive thing about like textures in music, and so there's if you have headphones on listening to it, there's stuff going on back there and up here, and but it's not too much. It needed to be short, and then it was a lovely little vocal piece. That was a melody that you came up with. You sent me a little voice note on WhatsApp and sang it, and I was like, all right, well, I know I've got to go there, so that's the main thing. And then the whistle and the crowd was a very late add-on. I sent you one without it and one with it, and I was like, I'll put it in. I kind of like it. You know, it's something to do with the club, something to do with sport. So no, it was really enjoyable, to be honest. And it was at a time when I was stuck into reading 50, 60 articles a day, trying to comb through for references for a thesis. So it was a nice thing that I could also look at. And it was, well, I didn't take it too seriously. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing for you to hear.
Well, no, I
um
appreciate it. I would probably
but
would it sounds that
but
kind of way. Like it should have it
yeah,
needs to be fun and kind of relaxed and stuff. It's a
yeah,
podcast that we're putting out on a hockey club channel. It's
yeah,
starting out like it didn't need to be too ostentatious or anything.
no.
Uh,
um and like it could have been the first version was 25 seconds long, and it had piano in it, and it was just too much of what ended up the same message, the same thing got across in 8, 9, 10 seconds, whatever the length actually is now. But
yeah,
no, it was really enjoyable. I'd never done it before. And like, speaking of all that, film and TV composition, it was stuff that I'd done in a much longer, more ostentatious scale for college. So to try and compact that down was challenging, but enjoyable. So no, I was glad you asked me to do it. And because you could have gone onto Fiverr and paid some dude in the States 50 quid to do it for you in a day. But no, it was a fun challenge. It was a
I
fun challenge.
discovered that after I'd asked you. No, it was you're the first person. Like it took me a while to sort of get onto you about it, but it was one of the things in my head was like, if I do decide to add a theme song, do you know what? Keep it in the sort of context of it being around the club. Certainly for the first,
Yeah.
um, there's some things are changing, so it might not be able to do it with a press. I don't know. Don't tell
Mm,
anybody.
big things.
Breaking news, everybody. Breaking
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
news. So it may have to change format a little bit, but it was very much that wanted to keep it sort of community based. And it was like, okay, well, we've got a musician in the club, got a musician in the family, obviously, but got a musician
Yeah,
in the club. It would be
in the
nice
club.
if different elements of this came from club members.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
was it was a natural fit, and it worked out really nicely. And I think, like I said, it's probably technically more of a jingle than a theme song. Probably has to be a
probably.
title on it to be a theme song. But look, as you said, it does the job in exactly the amount of time it needs to. Um,
Yeah,
and the whistle and stuff. I actually wanted to try and get a Fox 40 whistle blow uh,
yeah. I
for
actually googled Fox 40 whistle, and I just none of the sound bites were good enough to
yeah.
use. So
I wanted to get one of those so that I didn't have to go back and cut out any swearing. And I wanted to have a Fox 40 whistle blow that I could just
yeah,
spin anytime
that's
anybody.
great. That's
I haven't
great.
managed to get on top of it, but I got the whistle in the theme song, so that kind of did the job
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
for now. I actually tried to cut it out at one point, but there's too much background noise, so it just didn't sound
yeah.
like over the
I'll
over
send it
the.
over. I'll send you over the file of just the whistle. It's fine. Don't
So
worry.
I just even a couple on the editing software. There's a couple of whistles, but they were real like football whistles, and they sounded like there was a P in them, and I was just like, that just doesn't do it. That doesn't sound
Yeah,
like a.
yeah, yeah.
But
No,
no, and I can't thank you enough because I know you're obviously a little bit freer, or you get a lot of work for your thesis and you're able to use it. But I do appreciate you for taking the time out to put
of
something
course,
together and do it for free
of
and all
course.
that. And now hopefully this platform maybe not getting the most listens, but sure, look, it'll build. But you might get a little exposure because now you are actually going to treat us to a bit of a song, aren't you?
I am. Let me see if I can improve the lighting situation going on here first.
Oh,
A little bit better.
yeah,
Wow. Turn
thanks.
the monitor on. All right. Can I be heard?
You can, of course.
So yeah, you asked me to play a song, and I figured, I could play an old one that I've played 1,000 times and probably play better. But I'm probably going to be putting out music. Why not? I want to play something that's new. So I I wrote this song a little while ago. It's the newest of all the things that are going to come out in the next, coming months and year or whatever. Um, it's just a little bit of a vent, to be honest. It's trying to release a lot of frustrations and a lot of worries, because leaving college was sort of the biggest like transitional period in my life. Going into college, I only had one thing then on my CAO. I knew what I wanted to do. So
Mhm.
now getting released out into this, it's a little bit of like a first time for me to be kind of totally unaware of what's going to happen next and stuff. So it was maybe, like we were talking about, a little bit of writing with an intention, and also just kind of stream of consciousness stuff. Yeah, it's called Soar, and I suppose I'll take it away whenever you're ready.
Yeah, no, in your own time. Paul
Sweet.
Harrington, Pluto with Soar.
I am fighting for the time to breathe. I don't know who I'm supposed to please. I guess now get a job and pay my dues. If I make this choice, am I okay to lose? I feel like letting rain take me away. In this tide I can find my space, one with the waves and the shore, left to sink or to soar. I will find what I am living for. I'm sleeping a little bit better, 'cause this cloud under my head has gone through a change in the weather. Clear skies, another sign to ignite into my bloodline. The feeling that nothing in my dreams is as good as what I see. When my eyes are wide open, I know I'm gonna get soaked, but I feel like letting rain take me away. In this tide I can find my space, one with the waves and the shore, left to sink or to soar. I will find what I am living for, what I am living for, what I am living for, what I am living for. I feel like letting rain take me away. In this tide I can find my space, one with the waves and the shore, left to sink or to soar. Will find, I will find, I will find what I am living for.
Bravo. Paul
Thank you.
Harrington,
Thank you.
absolutely class. Guys, you guys have got the club is great at getting around people and getting around its own. And my God, when this man starts releasing stuff, let's make sure we get around him. Hockey community, Pembroke, everyone, get around this man. Pluto, Paul Harrington, when his music comes out, go find it, track it down, and help him out. Yeah, class, absolutely brilliant. Um,
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know a better way to finish. That's easily the best way to finish the podcast. Um, uh, thank you for your time. Thank you for
Of
taking the
course.
time to play.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for doing the the theme song and everything, and
Of course.
really wish you all the best going forwards. Make sure you let us know when stuff is coming. We'll get
Of course.
shout it out and everything. More eyes on it, the better. But Paul Harrington, you've been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, Si.
No
Appreciate
bother
it.
at all. Clubhouse conversations, Clubhouse music sessions now at this stage. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Hope you've enjoyed the musical guest. Can't really say much more. A little bit speechless, guys. Make sure you go like, subscribe to the channel. Keep checking in. We have one more episode to go. It's going to be a two-parter, and then we'll take a little bit of a break from them and see what happens next. But for now, go find Paul when you can, when his music comes out. Pluto, check him out. Until next time, guys, take care. Paul, you legend.
Simon.